Quite a few people emailed me about a viral video showing a joint like this one, and the cool thing about this joint is it goes together straight, or at a right angle like this, or at a right angle like this. The geometry of this joint is based on the rotational symmetry like this. So every time I rotate this cube by 120 degrees, it's kind of in the same orientation as it was before. So now if I slice this cube through right along here, rotate that by 120 degrees, it's still a cube. So imagine this split cube being part of a larger piece of wood on either side, and I've actually made another piece of wood that has essentially this cube. Here's one configuration, another, and another. Now this joint is kind of boring because, well, it doesn't interlock any. So we want some kind of joint surface area that can take orientations that are 120 degrees apart. And ideally for that would be something like this. So I can put these pieces together like so, or I can rotate one piece 120 degrees. And that's what I've done with this one. We have inside of here the same geometry which goes together in 3 different ways. Now back to this cube, I'm going to try to cut that joint on the bandsaw very crudely, and I'm going to start by cutting a pyramid off of either side, and the middle part will form the joint. So now we have the middle layer, and I need to mark the geometry on here. So here's this, and if I take these away, then that gives me that joint that's just like this one in here. And because these ones have more area on the bottom, I'll say those belong to the bottom, and these 3 belong to the top. It's a good thing I have the wood grain to guide me to know which way you're supposed to go on there. So I did this to both halves, and now I can put my cube back together like this, or rotate it and put it together, or rotate it again. So let's go back to straight, and let's attach a piece of wood to either end of this. So we'll make this a big piece of wood, and on here, now, how do I get this cube apart again? There we go. Whoops. I shouldn't have glued this part here. Okay, just scrape the glue off of where it wasn't supposed to go. And now I can assemble this straight, or I can assemble it like this. That's one right angle. Or like this. Now I'll try to recut this joint using some nicer material. And the first thing I need to do is to cut this corner off, and that'll form a triangular face. If you imagine this having not been cut, there would be a triangle right here. I just marked on here what parts need to be carved away to make this look like this one. And I could try to carve that away with a chisel, but that would take forever. Not my thing. So I'm going to use a panther rotor. To lay out the template for this joint, I made 6 triangles with exactly 60-degree corners. This was pretty tricky. The first 2 that I made actually didn't quite work out, but on the 3rd time I got it right. I'll use these to lay out my template like this. Okay, I got my workpiece set up on a V-block on a panther rotor, and this angle here is 35.26 degrees, and I put a hole in the middle of my template so I could make sure that the bit ends up in the middle here, and that's the only alignment that I've got. And in terms of depth of cut, I have to make sure that the bit cuts as deep as to this line right here. . Both halves of the joint are identical, so making the other half is exactly the same procedure. Well, I think I should have left a little bit of tolerance in here. It does fit together very nicely, but I'm afraid if I push this all the way, I may never get it apart again. I added a bit of extra slack by carving it out a bit with the chisel, and now it goes together fairly well. So here's one right angle, the other right angle, and straight. So how useful is this kind of joint? Well, not at all as far as I'm concerned, because it's way too difficult to get right. You'd only want to make this type of joint if you're looking for a challenge or you have something to prove. And it's really not very strong because it just doesn't respect the wood grain very much. A much more practical joint that can go